Hey everybody, today we're going to be going over the first dev diary for the Thrones of Blood expansion for Age of Wonders 4. That's our upcoming vampire-based expansion. What are dev diaries? I'm going to say this on the first video, and then for the rest of the Thrones of Blood videos we won't say it. Dev diaries are typically a way that Paradox, but they are being popular on other gaming companies as well, but primarily Paradox games use these to generate hype for upcoming content, get feedback, and generally just get people excited about upcoming expansions, open betas, any sort of free patches, anything at all, really. It's just generally to week by week generate hype for upcoming content. In this case, we're looking at the vampires. Now, me personally, if you've been following my Age of Wonders 4 content, I've generally been a bit frustrated that a lot of the rulers are special rulers that have nothing to do with your race. And a lot of people like them, and it's just been like a sticking point for me because I like playing racial, which means that since the game has come out 2 years ago now, I think 2.5 maybe, all I've been able to do is play generic champion. Which, yeah, so vampires seem to be a way to finally have a racial ruler that actually does, well, it's racial, I guess. I mean, I just said it right there. So, at any rate, let's just read through here. Hello, Lewis here, Senior Designer at Chime Studios, and today I'm going to talk about something I've been looking forward to since the release of the game Vampires. The Elder Vampire is a new leader type that will be one of the key features of the next content pack, Thrones of Blood, which will come out on November the 11th. I'm actually annoyed that this expansion, by the way, is coming out so close to Europa Universalis 5. For those of you who might be wondering, Europa Universalis 5 I've been looking forward to for so long, and the developers had said that they weren't going to release a new Age of Wonders expansion until next year. So I was like, okay, that works out for me. And now they're releasing it like in November already? In November? Like, wow, okay, so they're really putting out content. So that's good, but also dang. So I do enjoy vampires, and I do actually, I've read through this a little bit, not fully, but I've read through it a little bit, and I should make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. All those things help me immensely. And as always, this will be, as all my videos are, it's more of a podcast. It's more of like, let's go look at this thing, and then we talk for like an hour. I don't know how long it'll be here, probably maybe 30-40 minutes. But again, you can just put me on a second monitor or just listen along. You don't have to actually watch because we're just going to be looking through. Or you can watch. Either's fine, really. Elder vampires are ageless undead who have gained power through a curse dating back to the era of the arch vampires and the deathless god, though these tales are now considered more myth than truth, even by the vampires themselves. They abhor the sun and often desecrate the land through special structures, creating zones of somber darkness. These sunless lands allow them to exist outside caves so they may expand their domain and exert their influence. Mechanically speaking, if the vampire is not in underground, gloom, or sunless terrain, they cannot recover health on the world map and their damage is penalized. So, I'm kind of a bit worried when I read this one. This is my first worry, is that the meta for Age of Wonders 4, if you guys have ever watched me play the game, which I hope you have, then the meta is to take as many fights as you can, to expand as quickly as you can. And if you need to wait for sunless terrain, this is going to make vampires quite slow. I did hear from the developers that they wanted to kind of rework a little bit how experience worked, in that you didn't have to just take fight after fight after fight indefinitely, and then you would just giga level off doing that. That particularly if you were in more of a PvP type situation or in single play, if like you were fighting an empire or you weren't just chain clearing the map, that you could still generate experience. But with the system as it is right now, having to set up sunless terrain, this is my only worry about this, and I read through this originally and I was like, ooh, wait, what? Having to set up sunless terrain, then being able to move out? I mean, I guess it depends how much sunless terrain we get. You could always play underground for sure, and maybe vampires just have to play underground. I'm not sure about that one because mechanically underground's always been a bit weaker, and I think in particular it's a bit limiting. But if you do have to play underground, then you do, right? If you do, you do, right? But yeah. I'm just a bit worried that their experience is going to be pretty harmed. There are two types of the Elder Vampire, the pureblood and the hybrid. These differences are cosmetic. The pureblood is a vampire of a specific species tied to the lore, having a more custom look in terms of body and clothing, while the hybrid can have a form, but will not have as much customization as a pureblood. So what they're saying here is the pureblood is literally the vampire special race. Like, when you're the pureblood, this is the in the background, the lore vampire. So think like Giant King, Dragon, Eldritch. Like, they're going to be the vampire race, right? Whereas the hybrid, shown here, is it can be your race looking a little vampiric. I do like this, as it seems to be the best of both worlds, where he's definitely tied to your race. Now, I do hope that the pureblood still gets your racial transformations and counts as your race. Otherwise, that would be a bit awkward. I can only imagine that everyone having to go half-blood in order to get the racial transformations would be a bit awkward, but I'm sure they've thought of that. Like, I'm sure, yeah. At any rate, I think that's a good idea to kind of have the best of both worlds. They do look like they have a vampiric aesthetic on their weapons here, which I did kind of enjoy. The aesthetics of Age of Wonders 4 have always been pretty nice, right? So I definitely look how this guy looks as well. I can't tell if that's a helmet or if that's his head, though. Okay. Elder vampires replace the wizard tower structure and upgrades with their own vampire castle. The castle evolves its upgrades in the similar way to the wizard tower and shares a lot of the same unlocks, but the vampire castle and its upgrades give extra things. So, one thing I have seen on Reddit and other places that people looked at the screenshots and they went, "Oh, there must be a vampire culture. There must be." If I actually go look at this, let me give me 1 second. There were some people talking about it, and I just want to put this right here because, yeah, people are looking at this screenshot and saying, well, there must be a vampire culture. That's actually the vampire castle in front of, I believe that's a dark culture city. So I just want to say that because I did see that on Reddit and other places, and that's what's going on. This is just the vampire castle over a different culture. There's no vampire culture in the game. Okay. Well, there will be no vampire culture. Obviously, there's none now. For example, the Vampire Castle Foundation gives the same things as Wizard Tower Foundation, the extra Imperium and Vision range, but it also unlocks a feature of vampires, thralls, and ritual spells. We would imagine thralls use the same mechanics as Eldritch, but probably in a different way. Much like the Eldritch Sovereign, yep, the Elder Vampire has access to thralls, but the way to gain them is different. Instead of capturing them in battle, they are instead homegrown, using food ingram to produce them. They have a separate tracker and don't take away from population growth. So I did read that part. I kind of skimmed over this earlier, so like I half read it, half didn't. And I just did that so we could save time while reading this from me just having to like reread things 5 times and be like, huh? What? Huh? Sometimes things don't click in my brain so quickly. But at any rate, I did see this as a way for them to try to push food builds. It does seem food builds with vampires would be ideal, much in the same way the production builds with the architect culture was ideal. Next expansion will be a bit easy, well, a bit more interesting. I probably won't play multiplayer until next expansion if you're looking for that, but maybe I will. It'll come down to how I feel on each day, right? You know, there might just come a day where I'm like, all right, let's just get together and play. But I do think they're reworking Architect next expansion, and they're putting out vampires. And I say this every expansion, but next expansion will probably be the best for multiplayer, best for single player too, that they'll have. But I do think that incentivizing food growth to actually be like a scaling mechanic, something you want to run to, is cool. As you guys might have noticed, I love food builds. I've always just found them to be too weak. Their first ritual spell is shared with the Eldritch Sovereign. The Clairvoyance ritual lets you find nearby points of interest, but as they upgrade their vampire castle, they gain more unique rituals. From a ritual sacrifice that can heal the vampire in the world map, to a powerful blood moon ritual which blots out the sun and removes the penalties of the surface world to all vampires, no matter if they are in the sunless terrain or not. I guess if you were attacking opponents, you'd have to blot out the sun, right? I also see this ritual sacrifice that can heal you in the world map. I'm wondering if that's how you heal up your vampire, as he's like going camp to camp and clearing. But they do say that they would need a vampire castle for that, so that, you know, might come a little bit late in the game. You can normally get your wizard towered up, I'll say like by turn 15 to 20. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think that sounds about right though. That might be a little bit too late to start actually healing your vampire. If you have to keep running back to heal, that might not be too great. The side upgrades too follow this fashion. Instead of an item forge, the vampire has access to a soul forge that gets access to an item forge feature as normal, but in addition lets them recruit hatchling and matriarch vampire spiders, as well as 2 new units, the tier 1 Doombat and the tier 2 Shrieking Bat. It does seem like vampires are being tied to nature. I thought they were being tied to Shadow Chaos, but they very much feel like vampires fit very well with nature. I wonder if vampires will have any nature tomes, because you can get Matrix vampire spiders. I mean, that's a tier 3 spider that fits perfect with a beast vigor build, right? and then food becomes your thralls. Well, that has nothing to do with shadow, and that is chaos does a little bit of food, like a little bit of food, but it's mostly nature that does food. Nature loves food. Another example is the abattoir, which replaces the prison. The structure allows vampires to devour captured heroes instead of executing them as normal. This grants the vampire who eats the hero an amount of experience that increases with the level of the sacrificial meat. Up front, my main concern with this one is farming free cities for heroes. I'm wondering if that will definitely probably become a meta strategy and abused pretty quickly. We'll see how that one goes. There's already a lack of ability to kill heroes unless you're fighting free cities constantly. So, you'll probably end up, I think you're going to start ending up in weird situations. It's already getting on the verge there, but you're going to start ending up in weird situations where the best way to play is to make sure to raise and destroy every free city and never allow vassals, because vassals attack your opponents, and vassal armies are so weak and pitiful that 90% of the time, especially with their vassal income being so weak, that 90% of the time that it's better to just not feed your opponent those stacks for experience, for potentially gold or mana or knowledge, depending on which options they've chosen in vampire variations, in faction creation, empire affinity. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like generally just feeding them those stacks will generally potentially outweigh the advantage of having the vassal income at a certain point. And this goes on for most upgrades normally unlocked by the wizard tower. For example, the crypts become the deep crypts that allow vampires to regenerate faster in their domain. The channeling chamber becomes a ritual chamber that helps reduce the amount of thralls needed to cast rituals. I mean, that seems interesting. Vampires are definitely trying to become more of a magical faction without actually being a magical faction. Like they're very magic focused, despite the fact that you would need, or I should say that you could choose any other faction. But to me, this does sound like they're very nature focused. Nature does food, nature does mana, and if you want to build the wizard tower and its old upgrades, and you want to have enough food, that's nature. That's nature right there. That's exactly what nature does. So it seems that they're very much being tied to nature right here. Of course, vampires cannot be called vampires without spreading their cursed state to others. When they recruit or convert a hero, they transform them into a turned vampire, replacing their mortal champion hero's skill tree to that of a vampire's unique skill tree that grants them the undead unit type. They also suffer from sunlight weakness and gain a new passive called Experience Drain. As old turned vampires must submit to the Elder, a portion of the experience earned in battle by a turned vampire is granted to the Elder vampire instead. My only hope here is that if your ruler reaches level 20, if your ruler leeches to level 20, that he doesn't continue to steal more experience from his thralls. But I think this does solve one issue that some people had. Dragon rulers are so powerful, you could not possibly have secondary dragon rulers. Giant, Eldritch, same problem. You couldn't possibly have secondary them. But that annoys some people because they want the triple dragon or they want the triple giant to be, the rulers of their main armies. But this vampire thing does seem to solve that. Now, you do replace your mortal champion hero skill tree. The mortal champion hero skill tree, while not being exciting, I'm going to call it. It's not a very exciting skill tree. It's a very powerful one, giving experience to your units, giving them more healing, giving them more HP, status resist, giving them extra defense or % damage. So it's kind of one that you can put on to heroes that aren't like your carry big heroes to just buff the stacks under them. That ends up being quite impactful. So the new hero tree we'll have to see, because I'm going to assume that you might not want to give the vampire hero tree to... Can you choose to thrall or not? That's a question. When they recruit or convert a hero, they transform them. Okay, so you don't get a choice. The only problem I have with this vampire skill tree, and this is exactly what I was going to say, this looks very point intensive. And particularly if your hero is in a high level to begin with, you don't want to be putting like 2, 3, 4 points into this skill tree before you fill out your class skill tree. Unless it's like crazy powerful, right? The vampire's origin skill tree is all about draining blood from enemies, bestowing power to allies, and mind control. I hope we don't need to focus on mind control. I really hate the mind control mechanic in this game. I've said this a lot. It either hits or it doesn't. And if it hits, you win the battle. And if it doesn't, then you waste a turn on one of your most powerful characters. So it doesn't really feel good to use. A vampire starts with a blood draining ability, either a powerful melee ability called Draining Bite or a weaker ranged version called Siphon Blood. These abilities deal physical damage to a target and heal the vampire for half of the damage dealt. Unfortunately, you can only drain blood from those who have it, so units that are immune to bleeding effects cannot be drained. I kind of don't like that, even though it makes sense thematically. I don't think limiting vampires to being so weak against elementals, and I think skeletons can't be drained. I think undead, can undead be drained? It's been so long since bleeding has been relevant. I definitely know its elementals can't be drained. I think constructs can't be drained either. Either way, having vampires so weak weirdly to these niche things, I don't think would end up being a good thing. I think that would be a bad thing, because then you end up in the exact same problem blight damage had before they rebalanced all the different blight resists in the game. If blight damage is resisted by all these spiders and things randomly, then blight damage ends up becoming really bad, whereas now blight damage is pretty good because they reworked it and removed all the wacky resistances to it. The Elder Vampire's initial class determines if the vampire starts with a melee or ranged version, but can be repicked with a skill reset. Okay, a melee bite from a mage sounds bad, but okay, I mean, if you want to do that. These abilities then lead down two paths, a control path and a friendly unit buff path. So you do still get a buff path, okay. The first grants a vampire drains ability, grants a vampire drains, wow, my brain. The first grants the vampire's drain the ability to stun, and as the vampire earns experience, can then be turned into a mind control at higher level and becomes a dominate, allowing vampires to capture enemies for their own army at the end of battle for mana cost. I guess you're biting them thematically. The idea here is you're biting them and mind controlling them, and then you're yeah, okay. The second path starts with the ability Drain Familiar, which allows the vampire to feed on a friendly unit to regain hit points and strength. The vampire can then later have it where it becomes more symbiotic, the vampire sharing its profane strength temporary with the familiar, and even granting them a regenerative effect so the wounds from the feeding are not as grievous. Other skills grant the vampire the ability to bypass defenses when draining its enemies, reducing the cooldown on the drain ability, turn to mist when threatened, and even the vampiric flight passive, allowing the vampire to gain a flying movement speed and granting some evasion from ranged attacks. So definitely this feels like the strongest, just looking back at these as a whole, the strongest effect here feels like the ability to dominate enemies. I'm a bit worried that you're just going to have to play vampires as a mind control faction, which inevitably is going to involve Blizzard, Flash Freeze, and that sort of shenanigans. I'd like to play vampires as more of a, I don't know, like some sort of melee character. You know, oh, what's that game? You know, exactly, the big vampire game where you had the dude with the big sword who, Legacy of Kain, kind of like a Legacy of Kain type thing. That game hasn't been relevant in 20 years and no one's going to know this reference. Think vampire with big sword. That's what I would want, but I'm not seeing anything here that I could really use for that. I can see that's the mind control, that's cooldown. So definitely if you go this path, it looks like you're going for more of a mind control type deal, right? So yeah, that's mind control, dominate. Okay, so I'm worried here that vampires are going to be super focused on mind control, and mind control being such a frustrating mechanic because it either does work or it doesn't work. I'm a bit worried that it's just going to be annoying. I do see you could put 2 points over here and help this out, or maybe we could go down here. I'm hoping I don't have to play mind control with vampires because I really just don't like the mechanic at all. I do see a path here that avoids it. Maybe we could play like that. Could go like here and then over to here maybe. It does, okay, I mean maybe, we'll see. Signature skills. Because there are many fantasies and tropes surrounding vampires, I decided I would need a lot. Wow, it's like reading for me is hard. Because there are many fantasies and tropes surrounding vampires, I decided I would need to have a lot of options somewhere where you would get to pick and choose as a player what your ideal vampire plays like. To do this, I decided to use the signature skills. They were all unique to the vampire, and there's a total of 25 unique skills. That is a lot. I feel like actually that number, although it sounds really impressive and cool, actually worries me because it's going to be really hard to balance 25 skills. The beta for vampires, I hope, is really in depth with a lot of people giving feedback, because 25 skills, to me, if there were 10 skills, I believe they could have maybe 8 of them be viable. But with 25, I feel like they're somehow going to get an inverse effect where it's really going to be like 3 or 4 of them are viable, because like there's going to be 3 or 4 outliers that are just so much stronger that all the other ones just kind of become bad. That's my worry about giving a unique lord 25 skills. It's also hard to give feedback where it's like, well, in this build on the vampire, in this situation, this skill is completely overpowered, so you have to go this. You know, it's like, okay, cool, but like, what about all the other ones? And you're like, well, I wouldn't go the other ones because this one just dominates in this situation. And yeah, I think that that sounds like a lot. We'll see. The way the Elder Vampire works is that at each signature skill unlock step, they gain a different set of options. So at level 4, the Vampire picks from 4 options that give you an active ability and a passive, each with a different theme. For example, the Desecrator signature allows your vampires to cause rotting explosions by targeting corpses, and as a passive, grants a tier 1 zombie at the start of combat for more of an undead theme. So Desecrator is going to be, I'm going to assume Desecrator then flows into more of a spam summons type deal, and then you blow up the bodies. It's interesting that the Vampire Lord is becoming more of like a main character with the, well, I mean, I guess the Eldritch was also a main character. The Dragon is sort of a main character, but he's just really tanky, right? I think the mainest main character has always been the Eldritch. The Giant King is more about buffing his army and doing those sorts of effects. The Vampire and the Eldritch have always, well, I should say the Eldritch always have been kind of a main character. He's got like all these, like, you scroll through his ability list and you could actually like scroll through like 20 abilities. I'm going to assume the Vampire is going to be doing a similar thing. But at the very least, because you can turn your other dudes into thralls, it's not just going to be like the one vampire and then the rest of the army, but at least with 3 vampires controlling your armies, that'll be a bit better. Meanwhile, Hemomancer lets vampires sacrifice their hit points to empower their next attack, and passively they heal when they kill an enemy. Well, that's definitely going to be your melee vampire thing. If you get like, sacrifice your hit points to deal 50% damage, then you kill someone and heal back to full anyway. At level 8, they pick from 6 passives, that's a lot. From reducing cooldowns on kill, from the Reaper passive, dispelling enemy status effects with their attack with the Defiler passive, or empowering themselves as they gain hit points, or as their hit points are reduced with the Vampiric Rage. Now I'm wondering, I did see up here, as a point of thought, I did see that they had turn to mist when threatened. I'm interested in that, because you can combine being at low HP with Vampiric Rage with the fact that you wouldn't die, and I think that's important. All these things that rely on being at low HP you just die, so they're not really that great, but I'm interested if you could ensure that you couldn't die and then you kill people. I also see here Marrow Drinker, which I'm going to assume is more healing on kill. I can't really imagine what these other ones are. Let me know if you could think what they are. Defiler is probably a death body, like a blow up corpses, or maybe corpses have some debuff, something like that. Maybe it's just a debuff on enemies. Profane Body Master. I mean, it's definitely some buff thing, right? Reapers, well, I mean, that's obviously on kill. Night Lord. At level 12, the vampire picks a new active ability from 6 abilities. Here are some examples. Grave March creates 4 corpses of tier 1 skeletons in the target area, and then for the next 4 turns, the vampire revives a random corpse on the battlefield, be it from those you spawned or existing ones. That's going to be frustrating. The RNG here is going to be really bad. Can you imagine the vampire just randomly raises up a dead hero because it's undead? He just randomly like, oh, my hero's back to life, and you're just like, I think that one might be a little bit too random, Paradox. It's like maybe a little bit too random. Maybe a smidge. The variability of its effect is you can either raise a skeleton or your Giga Hero. You know, it's a little bit of a variance here. Cool effect, but yeah. Bloodblade damages and applies Blood Parasite, another new status effect I'll tell you in a few weeks, to the target and nearby units. It is interesting that vampires will have a good amount of support for like a melee vampire kill build and a ranged vampire debuff build. My only issue is with playing your hero as a debuff character. I shouldn't say your hero, your lord. Playing your lord as a debuff character has always been really weak, because unless you have like warlock levels of power with things like Steel Soul and things like that, you very much spending an entire turn to debuff enemies on your main lord is not a good use of your turn. When warriors can be potentially killing 2 or even 3 people, when mages, when combined with eldritch, can be AoEing packs of enemies or just insta-gibbing a character, when giant kings can also be killing 2 or even 4 enemies a turn, it feels a bit bad when you're playing a debuff character and you're like, I debuff these people, and then they just cleanse it on their turn. So we will see what happens, but debuff lords, debuff as secondary heroes has been good, because using your second or even third hero as a debuffer kind of does fine to as your third character, because he'll be like level 5, maybe 10, right? He won't be that important to be your main carry, but your main carry lord being a debuffer doesn't really work out. It kind of sort of works out as a warlock, just because they can hex someone, then go about their business, and then Steel Soul is such a powerful ability to kill an enemy and then just yoink them for your side. That's pretty powerful, right? And then the 2 zombies helps you clear the map and level up. So the warlock kind of works, but it hasn't really ever worked to just be like, I'm gonna play warlock as a debuffer. Like, if you go full into the debuffing stuff, yeah. Tormenting Mist creates a somber mist around the vampire that deals frost damage, demoralizes and torments enemies it reaches. They're definitely going for more of a Death Knight. I wonder if they're going to rework the Death Knight, so you can do Death Knight Vampire to kind of be a debuff-focused melee character. At its face value, this kind of suffers from the problem of you run up, debuff enemies, they turn around and kill you. Aha, you say. Okay, well, what good did that do you, right? Now your lord is dead. You lost the battle. The alternative is you need to debuff enemies so hard that it's generally going to be better than using your turn to just kill them, which is a bit hard to do considering how much damage you can get if you properly build, right? Blood Communion heals a friendly unit and the vampire both while removing status effects. I hope that doesn't use a full action. At level 16, things get a bit different. You get to pick from 3 signatures unique to your level, or you can upgrade the skill picked at level 12. The upgrade depends on the skill, but picking up, for examples from above, Grave March would summon tier 3 and tier 4 undead units. They really like the variance on this. I feel like Grave March is too random. Can you imagine summoning like 2 undead titans and reviving one instantly versus the next time you use it, you summon a bone horror? Like, the variance here is too variant, in my opinion. Like, you can't have this much randomness, because like this shit will actually win or lose a battle. It will not be good. It'll be funny once, but it won't be funny when you just get completely blown out by an enemy getting lucky or blown out by you getting unlucky. It just, in my opinion, I think it's just too variant. Bloodblight would spread to more targets. Bloodblight is the debuff. Target and nearby units. I'm going to say this makes Bloodblight a AoE 2. A level 16 Lord using an AoE debuff? Tormenting Mist would give you a permanent aura effect that mimics the ability it comes from. Okay, now that could be good. Dealing frost damage and debuffing enemies instantly upon getting in melee. I mean, that allows you to A, kill them easier, and B, it should debuff enemies who then come into range of you, giving you like a defensive effect, maybe. Blood Communion would infect adjacent units to the vampire and the target with blood parasite. Adjacent units to the vampire and the target. Unless his blood parasite effect is really strong, healing an ally and then you and your ally heal and then your enemies get debuffed and like that's your entire level 16 Lord's turn, that would not be considered a very strong turn. The 3 unique skills are Curse to Undeath, which is a ranged area effect that soulbounds all enemies hit, along with a passive that damages all soulbound units at the start of each vampire's turn. Yeah, I could imagine, like, if you're trying to do a debuff build, that one's not too bad. I guess the only problem is they could cleanse on their turns, but maybe keeping them cleansed, maybe you're in the back. It depends on how big the AoE is, right? Like, are we AoEing 2? The only problem is, like, okay, so I'm doing an Elementalist Eldritch, right? What's stronger? Teleport one shot, or AoE debuff a bunch of people and hope that over the next 2 or 3 turns you do a little bit of damage to them? Because I'm imagining this damage is going to be like 4 or 5. If it was like 10, 20, yeah, I could see this going, but I doubt it. Rosebound Noble allows the vampire to summon a tier 4 Rose Knight in battle, a new unit introduced in this content pack. Additionally, as a passive, the signature allows you to recruit Rose Knights from your cities. Well, I think I know which one's going to be the best. No picture of the Rose Knight. I'm going to imagine getting a tier 4 summon off your Vampire Lord. Oh, but making your entire build. But no, they do say making your entire build about getting your Lord to level 16 would be rough if you didn't reach it. But because Vampire Thralls give their experience to your Lord, you should be able to reach it consistently. It depends on how strong these Rose Knights are. I'm imagining Blood Dragons. You guys know Blood Dragons from Total War? I'm imagining Blood Dragons, and that, I think I would do a build on that just to do that. For no other reason than Blood Dragons. Supernatural Movement gives a vampire a free teleport skill in battle and fast movement speed to itself and all turned vampires under your control as long as they aren't mounted. That one's definitely strong, but it's strong in a boring way, where it's like, I'm going to play a warrior and then teleport and one-shot people. Like, okay. Okay. Like, it's strong, but it's not as interesting as, like, here's an entire new late-game build you can do. Like, okay, I'm, like, looking at this, I'm like, huh. Right? But, like, this one, I'm thinking, like, yeah, it's strong, but kind of boring, I guess. I hope you enjoyed this dev diary and are looking forward to playing with the new leader type. I had lots of fun designing it, and some of the Trive team might say I went overboard, but I really wanted to give the best translation of Vampire. I don't think you went overboard. I mean, a lot of these effects could be toned down or reduced in variance. I really, really hope they look at Grave March, but I do think a lot of these look really cool, is the thing. Like, my issue with the AoE debuffs isn't that I hate AoE debuffs. My issue with AoE debuffs is that they end up just not being as strong in actual gameplay. The concept of AoE debuffing people I do really like. The actual implementation is where I take issue with, because it's generally just better to kill people than to AoE debuff them, right? So I do like the idea that you've created all these different builds. You've created like Tormenting Mist, especially at level 16, looks like it could work perfectly with a Death Knight build. My problem is that what's stronger, being a Death Knight and AoE debuffing people, or being a warrior and AoE killing people. Because, and I don't know if you know this, dead enemies don't deal any damage to you. It's the ultimate CC. So, that's a cool vampire. I can't close. There we go. I would open up a new tab. I do like that. Look at like a little vampiric mount right there. That's cool. I like how they're using dark culture. Oh, they're gonna rework dark culture. Ooh, dark culture vampires. I'll do feudal culture vampires. I know. You're thinking like, you playing feudal? There's no way. I will come back in a few weeks with the new tomes I designed for the content pack. For now, I will leave with Baz next week and be talking about the vampire's favorite hangout spot, the Sunless Terrain. Yeah, let's see how quickly and easily this can spread, and if this is actually going to fit into the game. That'd be interesting. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Please make sure to like and comment and subscribe.